Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
I'm Ted.
And today we're going to talk about what does your class say about you. In this particular case, we're going to talk about the Sorcerer and their chosen origin.
Before we get into that, though, why don't you guys jump down to the description below, click on the link for the Nerdy newsletter, sign up. It's a great way to get tips and news delivered straight to your email, as well as find out ways to game with Nerdarchy.
So, okay, so this is kind of a new series. We've been examining the different classes and trying to discuss how being a member of that class and the choices you make within that class actually reflect the personality and what kind of character you're building. Not mechanically, but from a role-playing standpoint, it reflects the personality.
So we're looking at Sorcerer, and the origins that we kind of have access to at this time. You got Chaos, Dragon, Storm, and Shadow.
And Shadow's in Unearthed Arcana, so that one's kind of still playtest realm. And it's also one of the more interesting ones in the sense that they introduced these little quirks or flaws that go with the class. So which is huge, because especially in this instance, that is going to say a lot about your character, because there are things like, I'm afraid of the dark and I always carry a light with me. Or I mean, that might be the Warlock one.
Yeah, that one was actually the Warlock.
But the point is, right there, that's a defining thing in your character for you to portray during gameplay.
Right. So I would say that those four options, you can build the character and use the exact same setup except for the different origin, and I would think that they would have to be a vastly different character. For instance, the Chaos Sorcerer, that thing, make possibly someone that's wild and gregarious, and I see someone who's chaos born, if you will. Either you can go in one direction or the other. You totally embrace the chaos. You're a risk taker. You're looking to push those boundaries. You generally are unkempt. You're not one that's going to be, let me tie to myself up and go speak to the nobles. That's not that's too
and maybe a little crazy.
And a little crazy, but or the one who is aware,
they're fighting against their nature.
They're fighting against the nature, and they're aware that chaos is uncontrollable, and yet they're trying to
put order to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
even though they may drop a fireball at their feet accidentally, oops.
So that's one of those things that you look at, and that's the extremes that I see on that character. If you're not looking or prepared to go on one of those two extremes, I think you're taking away from that bloodline. There's a reason why you're a sorcerer. You're blessed with magical powers from chaos. Were you born in limbo? Were you are you related to something distantly that you don't know what it is? Was it some kind of magical shapeshifter?
You can do totally weird things too, like maybe you're just before your mother went into labor before having you, she had been impregnated by one of the slatties, and so you've been touched by limbo, and then days after you're born, your mother turns into a slat and eats your dad or something. But you could really do some interesting things with chaos, I think.
Right.
You have the Draconic bloodline where maybe your character is kind of has a reptilian mindset where he's cold and calculating, or you could go with dragons themselves are infused with the elemental powers around them, so are you fiery and fierce, like the fire the red dragon breathes, or
are you tough as stone? I know your go-to for everything is the dwarf. So what if you're a dwarven born draconic sorcerer, and you've got the linkages to the more earth-like dragons? You can breathe acid, and you're just hardy. You've got as diverse as the dragons are, you've got that many aspects that you can play off of. And then more so, what happens if your parent was a warlock with a dragon patron, and he went off and did his thing, and you wind up, being the offspring, years later.
You inherit some of the power.
And you inherit some of that power that, flowed through your parents' veins. Regardless of what happened with your parent, you now have this power that's bestowed upon you from dragons, essentially.
I mean, and the other thing too with the Draconic is really easy when you're talking about building characterizations for your character, because you can literally just open up for the dragon bloodline you've chosen and see what it says about that dragon.
And for the most part, you're gonna pick a dragon that fits what you want to play. You're not going to be like, well, I really like the cold and this, this and that, and I'm going to have a red dragon as my bloodline. What? Why? You're going to pick something that's fitting more to what you want to play. So I think that one's the easiest from multiple aspects. What about Storm? What do you see?
So Storm's a little bit more challenging in the sense that, like, how do you do Storm without it just seeming like chaos? Because I think there's a lot of similarities there.
There are some similarities, but if you want to break out science, storms function on actually more order than chaos, because
Well, yeah, there's patterns. There's
right.
a pattern that's followed
so
or whatever.
You could totally be the sorcerer that's just bent on a lawful nature, and really absorb the pattern, and that being something to focus on.
Could do that, or you could look at the element of lightning if that's what you're going for, or air or wind, because in some ways, like, you can like break down the elements of the storm itself and kind of try and build your personality around that. You have rain and water, you have wind, you have lightning, you have thunder. So like you could pull a little bit from each of those,
right?
Or maybe you specifically lean towards one thing or the other. I mean, even looking at some of the abilities of the Storm Sorcerer, like they cast a spell and they can fly.
Now the based off of that and some of the other abilities, the thing where they clearly would be diverse from the Chaos Sorcerer is I see the Storm Sorcerer as someone that likes to be outside. Like they're not going to like to be confined.
Well, and that's true too. Like that character, that personality might be more like, and it was introduced originally on Arcane, Waterborn. So like that personality for that character might be they like to be, like you said, outside. Maybe they like somewhere like open spaces like fields or a coastal settings, or to be on the prow of a ship, where they can really embrace and absorb those elements. Right. Maybe your character is like a storm chaser. They feel not only are they born of the storm, but they feel drawn to the storm. So you could do things like that.
I see them as almost druidic. Like they don't have the connection to the land and the animals, but they have it to the weather, and like this is the kind of person that would totally be on a spring and summer rain, just out there getting rained on and loving it. It's like, yeah, it's the storm. This is where I'm most alive. This is where I want to be. As everyone else is trying to huddle to get out of the rain.
Yeah, you know what, I agree, and like I think another difference between chaos is where the chaos is kind of like if you're going to really embrace that, you're more random, and I think you can embrace the storm by being more have more spontaneity to you without actually being random per se.
Right.
Like even though you may be rash and do things on a whim, but they're still
going to be on a certain path.
Yeah, there's still rhyme and reason to it. Where if you're really embracing chaos, there may be none whatsoever.
So finally, let's look at Shadow, and I'm not overly familiar with this particular this particular bloodline. That was in the Unearthed Arcana Light and Dark, right?
Yes.
So generally, like, is this geared towards like darkness or undeath?
Nah, I think it's more like darkness. So, I think with the Shadow, you might be doing more like. You might do something like this character's like, maybe your character's like albino, or maybe they have an aversion to sunlight. Not like they can't go in it, they just don't like it.
Right. Because like that's part of the problem with D&D is like I hear shadow and I'm talking D&D, I'm thinking the undead creature.
Right.
So when you're using very concrete terms that you say shadow to most people and they're thinking, oh, the thing behind the light. Got it. So anytime I think of shadows, like I'm instantly thinking of dark and of stealth. So like that's the first thing that jumps to my mind. So if you have the kind of character who has, as you say, the aversion to light, like when they make all of their choices about where they're going to stand or sit, it's always going to be, all right, I'm going to be over on this angle, I'm going to be out of this light. And you could try to always be selecting stealth as one of your skills, and generally try to be stealthy, not so that you are unseen, but just so that you're sticking to the shadows. Because
I see it more like a way to look at it, and really, like, I don't have this one memorized because it's done on Arcane, but just going off of the theme of the shadow, and we'll just say, for instance, darkness, because it really doesn't matter. It's just for the character, for a character concept and characterization. So if you're looking at that, then you might go with maybe aversion to bright lights, aversion to loud sounds. So how does this really come across in your character? Well, maybe he always speaks in a whisper or a quiet, raspy voice. Maybe, even without things like taking stealth, maybe you always just avoid making a lot of noise. And in social situations, you always try to blend into the background. You're like the consummate wallflower type character.
Right.
You don't like attention. You don't want to be the center of attention and have all the focus on you.
Right.
So like a character like that would be more like in how you describe their mannerisms. I think more so than the actual like role playing and talking, or the fact, like I said, maybe that character like always wants a quiet and maybe like if they have like loud gregarious characters in the party, like maybe they're always at odds with those characters or frustrated with them or flustered by them,
right,
because like they're the antithesis to what they're all about.
Right.
You could also do, maybe these characters are always in heavy robes and heavy cloaks. Even when it's hot out,
right,
their skin is always covered, their face is always shadowed. And not necessarily like in the evil way, or maybe they like to hang out at cemeteries and creepy places, not necessarily raising dead or anything like that, but this character you can kind of like play as the goth type character for sure.
Absolutely.
But that would that might be an accurate characterization for that character. Or maybe they just believe you can't have light without darkness, and they kind of have a reverence for the night and darkness.
And still, at the same time, you can do that and be a good character.
Oh yeah,
like,
you could even worship a deity of night and darkness. And you're not a cleric, so
right. So I think that that covers it. What do you guys think out there? Did we miss anything? Do you have any cool tips that you want to share? Put it in the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, even subscribe.
And you can hang out with us over on nerdarchy.com.
So until next time, stay nerdy.